Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Time, a Wave original presented by Perplexity. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Subscribe, like, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars, I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. It is Haberstroh Friday. Tom Haberstroh of Yahoo Sports and others. Tom, what's going on?
What's going on, Bo? Good to be here.
Hey, man, glad to have you. I asked you right before we got on what jersey that was that you had behind you. I will stop you from having to address your camera shot, but there we go. Tyrone Muggsy Bogues from the east side of Baltimore, and you have a hot Muggsy Bogues take.
I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. It's insane that a dude who's 5'3" and had a 14-year NBA career, high-level career, not just like scraping on by on the back of these benches. This dude was a good NBA player who was like 8 standard deviations away from the norm in terms of his height. Like, this is a league of giants. This is the equivalent of a blind baseball player hitting 300 for his career. That is what Muggsy Bogues is like in the NBA. I don't understand how he's not in the Hall.
So I do think that this is an interesting one, right? Because I think we talked about this on the internet a few months ago, that his career, I don't think quite gets enough credit, because it's not as though he was, like you said, just at the end of the bench somewhere, right? Like, this is a dude that averaged a double-double for a full season in the NBA, right? He was a very good defensive player. All of those things. The Hornets were good with him. Obviously, there are limitations that come when you have a 5'3" point guard. But the idea that he was a starter for all of that time in the NBA. And I remember there was one year where I can't remember exactly which year it was, but I think he averaged more rebounds than James Worthy.
Yeah.
Now granted, that was an indictment of what James Worthy was at that point in his career. But he was a guy, and also was incredibly famous at the time, because the Charlotte Hornets were really cool because they had jerseys that were them colors, and they had Larry Johnson, and they had Alonzo Mourning, and they had Muggsy Bogues.
I'm telling you, man, here in Charlotte. So I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. I moved here in 2017. And they have murals in like one of my favorite restaurants and bars in town. Like, there's a mural of Muggsy Bogues, Alonzo Mourning, and Larry Johnson. And people forget, like, the 90s Charlotte Hornets. I grew up north. Everybody was wearing that starter's jacket. Yep. Everybody. That was the most coveted starter jacket in the game, is the Charlotte Hornets with the purple and teal. And people are like, man, Charlotte Hornets, how can they get back? Like, they're such a depressing franchise right now. I'm like, y'all don't understand. The Charlottes were the team in the 90s. Like, they were the grandmama. Like, you're kidding me. Like, this Charlotte Hornets team with Muggsy Bogues, Zoe, grandmama, they had it. There was something about Charlotte, the Hornets, the colors, the nostalgia. Muggsy Bogues was he was in Space Jam. He was in Curb. Like, this dude is a legit star, and people love him. The one person my mom always said she wanted to meet, Bo, in the world of sports, the one person is not Muggsy Bogues, but his mother. She was like, his mother, whatever she had to do to give the confidence and breathe the inspiration and the dreams of someone who stood 5'3" to believe he can be one of the best basketball players on the planet. That takes a mother of mothers, and I'll never forget that.
Well, 2 things, right? Number one, Muggsy Bogues is also the most kid-friendly basketball player of all time, right? Like, part of the Steph Curry phenomenon is that he is incredibly kid-friendly. Steph Curry is Gulliver to Muggsy's Lilliputian, if in the grand scheme of things, right? Like, Steph Curry is literally about a foot taller than Muggsy Bogues is. Just throwing it out there. But number 2, I firmly believe that while his mother probably did a lot to breathe in the courage and everything he needed to make the dream, the other part that is assuredly true is, I guarantee you, man, that boy can fight. Ain't no way in the world you getting as far. Him, what's that boy's name? Earl Boykins. I bet you go to Cleveland, the street's going to tell you don't want no problems with Earl. Earl bench pressed like 400-something pounds too, by the way, right? That told me everything I needed to know about how Earl Boykins got to where he got.
Yeah, and also Dunbar in Baltimore. That team was the best high school team in the country. And the fact, how many NBA players are like D1 level guys that were on that team?
So what jumps out is him, Reggie Lewis, rest in peace, David Wingate. I think there's one more NBA player I'm not thinking of.
Yeah, like you're on that team and you're coming from that city. Like you're legit. And he played on Team USA, Muggsy. And like, this is one of the most incredible careers. Forget the 5'3", but just in terms of like the accolades, like this dude had it. And so I've always been a big fan. We have the same birthday. I got Michael Beasley and Muggsy Bogues on my birthday, and so I've always had this like kindred thing with Muggsy. I love that dude, and I really hope that one day we can get him into the Hall.
By the way, I love that this is in the first paragraph of early life in the Muggsy Bogues wiki page. Bogues was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and grew up in the Lafayette Court housing projects. His mother was 4'11", and his father was 5'5". He had 3 older siblings. They just immediately let you know the boy never had a chance.
Not a chance. And look, he also had one of the best assist to turnover ratios in NBA history. Like this dude was averaging 10 assists a game with like 1 turnover. He was averaging 2+ steals a game. And like Michael, there's clips of Michael like hating to guard this dude. There's clips of Muggsy Bogues blocking Patrick Ewing. Like he played hard and nobody wanted to face that dude.
Yeah, man. I'm looking at this and thinking of all of this. Wow, I had completely forgotten a whole range of this, but this is crazy. All right, I want to get back to modern day NBA. Wednesday night, Luka Doncic had his comeback game for the Mavericks. He put up 31 in the first half. I want to say he finished with 42. We'll get to the game performance itself, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about the surrounding everything of the game, because I think the Mavericks were in a bit of a tricky spot, right? A tricky spot of their own doing, just to be clear. They traded away maybe the most popular player in franchise history. The fans are still not over it. Everybody got hurt after they made this trade, so there was no but that could really be drawn in. And as is typically the case when somebody comes back, they had the tribute video, and you make sure that the player and the fans know that you appreciated everything that player had done. The difference in this case, though, was that player right now is so much more popular than everybody that is associated with their own team. A team that then, by the way, asked people to pay more for their season tickets for the next season after they traded away everybody's favorite player. Yeah, a real bungle sort of situation. But am I the only person that felt like it went a little bit too far with the T-shirts in Slovenian saying, I guess it said, thank you, Luka, or whatever it had to say, just because it went from being a tribute to the arena throwing Luka Doncic night, which if I were on the team, I'd be a little bit furious. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that it took Anthony Davis a while to get going in this game. As he looks around, it is Luka Doncic night.
Man, like this whole arena, I was not there to be sure, but I wanted to point out that there were people outside of the arena with boxes of clown noses handing them out to fans. They were doing Fire Nico chants in their own building while Luka Doncic had the ball. Like every time he had the ball, they were cheering or doing Fire Nico chants. And you know who isn't still over that trade either? Is Jason Kidd. Saw him after that game walk straight to the tunnel. Like he's not over that. He's still feeling a certain way. I'm not saying he didn't want Luka traded. I'm saying there's a lot of raw emotions on both sides here. And Nico Harrison has not sat in his seat that he normally sits at. He's in the tunnel with security. Tim McMahon reports that according to team sources, and it's important to underline that, team sources, someone from within the Dallas Mavericks is leaking this information to Tim McMahon, that the trade probably costs 9 figures over the next several years, projected to lose dozens of millions of dollars this season due to dwindling sponsorships, ticket sales, and merchandise. The people inside the house, Bo, are not happy about this trade. And it's not just the fans. It's the employees that you saw Luka Doncic walk into the arena and he's hugging people left and right. And they're also leaking business figures to show how much of a disaster this trade has been.
Yeah, now, one thing to note about a lot of these Fire Nico chants and everything else, this was a close game for the vast majority of it. Like LeBron James put the game away with one of those, I can't believe it's year 22 sort of fourth quarter performances. But even with Luka putting up all those shots and making all of them, he had 31 points in the first half. It was a 3-point game. The fans were openly cheering basically against the home team. And this was something that was easy to foresee going into the game that it was going to happen. And Luka is the sort of guy who has the ability to go into that place of focus and in a game like that decide I'm going to put up 31 points in the first half. It also was not a sterling defensive performance from the Mavericks. They did not make it that difficult for him to put up the 31, but I am not as hard on Nico about making this trade as other people, because I still contend he's the guy that's been around this dude the most and looked around and was like, it ain't going to happen here. And I do think it took a startling level of courage to decide that you were going to be the one to make the trade. They handled everything after it terribly, though. Like, if you're going to do this, you got to have a sell. You got to be able to come in front of everybody and at the very least sound incredibly confident about why you've made this decision. And like, look, I get it. You think this is crazy, but I'm telling you right now, this is going to work, right? And at every turn, you got to be willing to guy that stands up on it. Instead, they look soft, they look weak, and then the Lakers look good. This is a disaster. There's just no other way to put it. Full on disaster.
The Mavs are 6-14 in their last 20. Kyrie Irving out with a torn ACL. Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively and Anthony Davis come back and they get destroyed by Luka in this game. Like, there was no resistance. Luka was going right at those dudes for most of that game and scoring over them. Anthony Davis was absent for most of that game. And you know what's interesting about these like reunion games or like homecoming games? It's kind of a truth serum. When you're going against your former team, they're going to guard you the way that they were afraid that other teams were going to guard you. Like, Anthony Davis got doubled every single time he got the ball in the post. And you know, JJ Redick and LeBron James were probably on the other side, be like, yo, the way to beat Anthony Davis is we got to frazzle him. Put two bodies on him, and he's not going to be able to get out of it. He's not going to be able to split that double coverage, and he's going to figure out a way to cough up the ball. That's exactly what happened. And I got to imagine a lot of emotions for Anthony Davis too. Like, he's trying to prove, like, I'm the guy that's going to save this trade from being an outright disaster to like a break even. And ultimately, I don't think he's that good to wash away everything that Luka does on the other end. And secondly, you said you're like easier, a little like less harsh on Nico Harrison in the trade. I just feel like, Bo, the process is what bothers me. Is like, if you are going to look at Luka Doncic and say, that's not the guy, he's not going to stay healthy, but you're the only one who knows that. That's how you use leverage in trade negotiations. And you say to Rob Pelinka, like, I'm going to get that 2031 first round pick. I'm going to get Austin Reeves in that deal because we just went to the NBA Finals with this dude. He's 25 years old. You're going to have to cough up more of your assets. And that, Bo, is what I have a problem with. If Nico didn't believe that Luka was the guy, he keeps that close to his vest and he goes into trade negotiations with a lot more leverage.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I don't think that arena looks or sounds any different if they had gotten back 8 first-round picks, Austin Reeves, and look like we talking about Austin Reeves and Luka Doncic in this trade, kind of like I look at back when into the Celtics back in the day when they traded Danny Ainge to Sacramento and they got back Joe Klein. Hey, one goes out, one comes in, all right? Like, the fans appreciate that. One goes out, one comes back in. I think that arena still would have looked the same because they traded. I stopped rooting for the Hawks and they traded Dominique. Dominique was 34 coming off of an Achilles tear. They traded Luka Doncic at 25. And I think for Anthony Davis, where this is interesting, because when they first got him, he went super hard and then he got hurt, right? But I don't think that Anthony Davis ever imagined a world, because let us not forget, Anthony Davis, now as I think of it, Anthony Davis was probably the last true, this is a no-brainer superstar. Drafting him in number 1 pick in the draft, like the way we talked about Tim Duncan coming in the draft, the way we talked about David Robinson, Shaquille O'Neal, those sorts of guys. You could say Zion Williamson to a degree. I guess Victor. My bad. There was Victor. But in between those guys, but Anthony Davis was that level dude. Do you think he ever imagined a world where a team would trade for him? And not only would he not be considered the best player in the trade, but that the team that got you wasn't really happy about it?
Yeah, man, that's tough for Anthony Davis. And like, look, the defense is what's going to like carry the day, and they could not stop Luka and the Lakers in that game. And I think that's the problem is like, if you're going to trade Luka Doncic because quote unquote, what Nico Harrison said is defense wins championships, then you got to make sure you're going to be a lockdown defensive team. And Anthony Davis, it starts with him. He can't go guard Luka. He can't. He's begging for fives. Like, he wants to play with a center because he doesn't want to bang down low and be that rim protector. And so you're getting Anthony Davis to be a two-way superstar when he only wants to be a one-way dude who's not going to be able to switch on to Luka or guard ones, twos, threes, or even like a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. There are limitations to Anthony Davis's defensive ceiling, and yet that is the brand of basketball that Nico Harrison has set for the franchise going forward. I do want to say this, though. The NBA conversation this season, there was a lot of conversation about ratings. There's a lot of conversation about too many threes or too many free throws, what have you. A lot of people are trying to solve the NBA. What happened before the game where Luka Doncic is crying and he's sobbing watching this tribute video, and his lip is quivering like a Looney Tunes character trying to hold in an ugly cry. I think that might have done more for the NBA's trust with the audience, or at least from the intrigue and the drama and the belief in the NBA product, than pretty much anything we've gotten this year. That moment right there, it shows me that Luka Doncic really cares, that this is personal, that this really hurt him deeply. And I wonder if all this stuff about, NBA players make too much money, they just go from team to team, all they care about is themselves. I kind of feel like Luka Doncic's reaction to that tribute video and that image of his eyes bloodshot, waterlogged, and his lip quivering will stay with a lot of fans who maybe checked out in the NBA and been like, oh, these team player relationships and the Dallas relationship with Luka, that mattered to that dude. That player cared about his relationship with his team in ways that I think a lot of sports fans feel like NBA players do not care about anything other than the check.
I think that what it gave us, and I think there's something to that, because I don't think there's any winning over the people who believe that only NBA players only care about a check, because somehow this is the only league where they think that people play for money. I don't, we could get into like exactly what the rationale is, right? But what I think it gave us, if nothing else, is a storyline, right? So to me, I think an underrated demerit of the era of parody that the league, it's created by the league, right? Like, they decided that parody was what they wanted, and basically losers deserve to win too. I feel like it's kind of ultimately what you wind up saying when you make it when a team gets good and you have to break it up because of these aprons and everything else. Even losers want to be good. And so you had to create a situation where a league where a lot of these owners are losers, they get their opportunity to be good too. Okay. But the idea that Minnesota, for example, has gone back. Now, granted, they traded Karl-Anthony Towns. I get you. But they're down to 8 after getting to the Western Conference Finals. And it doesn't feel like they've been disappointing as much as that's the league that we're in. What that creates, or what that takes away that we used to have, that I think is important to this, that has always been important to these league and storylines, is the idea of a build. Right? Like, you start here and then you go here and then you get here and you keep bumping your head against this ceiling, right? And then finally you struggle to get over. Like, when we talk about the 80s and 90s, there's so many teams that we could point to, and we talk about their climb. The Shaq Kobe Lakers, for example. You can talk about the height of it, but the height of it was built by a 4-year climb that involved a lot of disappointment. And so I think a lot of what happens is there's this kind of just ping pong up and down there, and you don't really have like stories and rivalries and the likes to really hold on to and go to. And the Luka thing wound up being a very, very, very relatable thing, I think, for all parties involved. But it's not like beforehand, every show that talked about Luka nonstop after that trade, they hadn't talked about the Mavericks one goddamn time that whole season. I know, I watched these shows, but once that happened, it was in relatable story territory, and everybody jumped in on it. And I think that what you point to there with Luka in that last night was, I think, relatable for everybody, because that's, the Mavericks are fortunate, man. They've had that relationship with their star player for the last 27 years. Like, what you hope for as a franchise is to have a guy that you love that much, where if he wound up being traded, it would break everybody down. Like, can you imagine if they traded Giannis in, say, 2020 out of nowhere?
I mean, if the Cavs were like, you know what, LeBron keeps showing up short in the postseason, we're trading that dude.
Or he can't ever show up on time. That's what it would be if he can't ever get here on time.
He likes cookies too much. We got to get him out of here. That's the thing about this trade, is like, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop where Nico has a sit down and he explains everything, but he's been hiding. He hasn't really talked to the media. He's been staying out of the spotlight. And so we don't have that like, oh, now it makes sense. We don't have that. And by the way, the whole parity thing, I get it. There's a lot of financial and fiscal restraints that the new CBA has put in to smush all the teams kind of in the middle from what they can do cap wise, right? But there's also this other thing, which is injuries. I think that a highly underrated reason why we're seeing the last 6 champions be a new champion is because of injury rates of star players. This is so much harder to build a sustainable building on building on building because Giannis is getting hurt. Chris Middleton's getting hurt. Damian Lillard's got a DVT. A lot of players are getting hurt in the postseason like they haven't before. And so we're seeing a lot of these would-be dynasties or these teams that would win back-to-back championships are losing because of injuries. And I think that's a huge part of the formula, why we're seeing more parity when, in fact, what it is players are breaking down. Secondly, Anthony Davis was hurt for 30% of the Lakers games that in the regular season. He was not this modicum of dependability and reliability. So, like, if you are going to go with the defense wins championships, okay. But you can't argue that this was all about Luka Doncic breaking down because most players in the NBA are breaking down in their primes. And also the guy that you traded for, Anthony Davis, his nickname is Street Clothes because of how much he's been missing games.
His nickname is Street Clothes because somebody said it once and it was funny. Now, also to be fair to Anthony Davis, the last 2 calendar years, he had been much more durable. Now, the question becomes, do you become a more durable player as you get older, or was that just a streak of good luck? Like,
he's
also
6 years older than Luka, Bo.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I said that is the counter argument. It's worth presenting that in the last 2 years, he had played something like 95% of their games. The question about Anthony Davis, to me, in terms of his games played in the past, was less about durability than it was willingness to play a little bit hurt. And I think my thought had always been in those last 2 years, he had demonstrated himself to be more willing to play hurt, less than it was about being injured. Because I'd also wondered early in the time with the Pelicans in particular, if he's a little hurt and you're not going to make the playoffs, are we just putting him on ice anyway? And that ends up going into the game count. But I will throw this out here on Luka. You and I are both guys that look at the numbers a bit. I don't know if we use them to the same degree, not saying that in either direction. But I am one of those people that looks at win shares per 48 as a thing that matters, right? Like, or at the very least is a very interesting reflection. At the very least, mapping out to MVP, for example. The MVP in the league just about every year has been the guy that has been been tops in win shares per 48. Even this year, the top 2 guys by a wide margin are Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Nikola Jokic, who we will talk about in a few. Luka is in that kind of sort of interesting space of volume scorers where your eyes are telling you one thing and that particular advanced number doesn't always line up with it. So Luka typically does well in win shares per 48, but that also goes up as your usage rate goes up. And Luka has literally the highest usage rate in the history of the NBA. What is fascinating is that all of us would say that we look at Luka Doncic as a great postseason performer, and we could point to his great postseason performances. His win shares per 48 in the postseason get into average pretty good player territory in the NBA. This year, it's been at fringe all-star level performance, which is to say, I could see how if you are the Mavericks, you could talk yourself into the idea. Like, for example, his win shares per 48 last year were 0.220, which is very high level player. This year is 0.150, which is probably make the all-star level. You could talk yourself into saying, I don't know so much if this is going to be a thing to work long term. But a story Matt Doherty told after Dean Smith died was he called Dean Smith once and said, what do you think I should do? We're up 3 at the end of the game. Should we foul or should we play it out defensively? And he said, Coach Smith didn't really give me an answer, but he said, whatever you do, it has to be something you can explain to the media and the fans. And they could not explain this to the media and the fans, which makes none of the other stuff matter. These are arguments that I could make there that if you're in the weeds of basketball, I might be able to get you to understand. If you just watch and like it, you ain't trying to hear that shit I was just talking.
No. I mean, the guy was just coming off of finals run at 25 years old. So it's really hard to convince that he's not that guy. He is that guy. And everybody that has as many first team All NBAs, scoring titles, deep playoff runs in his career at 25 years old, they go on to become an all-time great. And you can argue this guy is not dependable in terms of like his diet or his nutrition, his off-court stuff. You can say all those intangibles, he doesn't have it. But one way you can make sure that he's going to be a lot more motivated to get those things right is to trade him to LA. Like now that dude is going to make you look really dumb. And that's what happened on Wednesday night. When you have Luka Doncic scoring 45 points because he's motivated, he's got a chip on his shoulder, and everybody's chanting either Luka, or fire Nico. That's what you did. You lit a fire up under his ass. And now you're seeing what's happening with Luka Doncic is like, man, that dude for us, he's not going to get right. He's not going to be well conditioned. He's not going to take care of that calf. But if I trade him to the Lakers next to LeBron James, you're going to be giving him a lot more motivation to get in shape and prove that he is that guy.
Or you're hoping that LA get a hold of him. That's what you hoping. You hoping that he out here, go, ale, just in the streets. I know that ain't really an LA song, but you know the vibes I'm thinking about. Like you hoping Luka just like, hey man, LA done much better than Luka Doncic.
Hey, I want to ask you about this after the game. Speaking of celebrating and like all the emotions attached to this and him being in LA, I wanted to get your take on Mark Cuban after the game while Nico's gone and Jason Kidd is gone. After the game, Mark Cuban makes sure in front of the cameras he daps up Luka Doncic and makes sure that he gives him a good embrace on TV. Because I'm looking at this and I'm like, man, the NBA is the palace intrigue in the NBA is so fascinating to me. Because Mark Cuban sold his team. The guy that no one ever thought would ever sell his team sold it to this family and is now attending a game in which they're saying, fire Nico, the guy you hired to help you steward your franchise with Luka Doncic. You trade it to the Adelson family and Patrick Dumont, and you wanted to run basketball operations. And now we're hearing from Mark Stein that he didn't want it to be written into the contract because he didn't want it to be considered an employee. He did not want to be an employee. So he said, all right, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, handshake agreement. I will still control basketball operations, right? Right? And they pulled the rug out from underneath them. And now you got Mark Cuban after Luka Doncic puts 45 points up in the fire Nico chants. You know who's up there smiling ear to ear after his team. He still owns a chunk of the team, Bo. He still is a part owner of the Dallas Mavericks, and he's smiling ear to ear when Luka Doncic drops 45 on him. This is a crazy development. And Mark Cuban, man, it has been an ugly look for him, the way he's handled this whole thing.
Coming up next. This episode is presented by Perplexity. Perplexity is an AI-powered answer engine that searches the internet in real time to deliver fast, clear, high-quality answers. Unlike legacy search engines that respond with a list of links, Perplexity skips straight to the answers you need, explained in everyday language that's easy to understand with sources and citations. Now, Sean, how do you use Perplexity, especially when it comes to the right time?
You know, Bo, obviously, like I've been using it all throughout the show, especially when you need questions answered or stats confirmed. But, you know, say you're curious about a specific topic from our If You Haven't Heard segment. For example, if I wanted to know more about this corporate espionage happening with a company called Rippling, I can simply search the question on Perplexity and get a full summary of the entire situation, which you can see here. And I would recommend you reading it because it is insane.
Hey, man, you got to love reading about honeypots and corporate espionage, and incredible that we got that answer so quickly. Discover faster, more reliable search with Perplexity today. Download the app or ask Perplexity anything at perplexity.com. You ready to win real money this March Mania tourney? Struggling to choose which team will pull off an upset? Forget about the teams. All you need to focus on are player stats to rack up big cash prizes with DraftKings Pick 6. When it comes to massive payouts, DraftKings dunks all over the competition.
Pick Six is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. Track your picks for a shot to win huge cash prizes. It's as simple as that. It's super easy. All you need to do is pick 6 players and decide whether their points, rebounds, or assists will be more or less. Turn your March Mania knowledge into cash today. New players get $50 in Pick Six credits instantly with just a $5 entry.
Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code BOMANI. That's code BOMANI for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Help is available for problem gambling. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as a non-withdrawable Pick 6 credit that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer.
Sean, you know I stopped drinking, but apparently there's a great product for people who want to have a better tomorrow after a night out.
Yeah, I got to tell you about this game-changing product, Bo. I use it before a night out with drinks. It's called pre-alcohol. Let's face it, after a night with drinks, I don't bounce back the next day like I used to. I have to make a choice. I can either have a great night or a great next day. That is until I found pre-alcohol. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. And this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow.
Now that seems too good to be true, man.
You know, I was on the fence about it also, but every time I have pre-alcohol before drinks, I notice the difference immediately the next day. Even after a night out, I can confidently plan on bouncing back the next day to tackle whatever the day has in store for me.
This March Madness, don't let anything sideline your celebrations. Grab pre-alcohol before you go out and be ready to cheer on your team all day and night long. Go to zbiotics.com/Bomani to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Bomani at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/Bomani and use the code Bomani at checkout for 15% off. All right, we're back on the right time with Tom Haberstroh. And yes, you make a great point there about the whole Mark Cuban angle of this, right? And so there's so much, right? Cuban sold high, right? And so the thinking has always been the Adelsons have an ultimate plan to want to do some casino business in the state of Texas. And this was their way to get in. They hit Mark Cuban with an offer that he could not refuse. It was hard to believe. And I remember when that trade was made that I thought I remembered them saying that Cuban would still basically run things. These people would just get all the money. And then it ultimately did not go that way. And so when people make this argument now that Nico did this, or if you were to make the argument that Nico did this and the owners didn't have anything to do with this, baby, I'm sorry. There is no way in the world that they forced Mark Cuban out so that they could give all the power to a man named Nico. No, zero chance. That did not happen, right? Everybody had to be involved in this. I just don't see any way in the world, especially given what the bottom line effects of this have been, that you're going to make this move and the owners not be in on it, right? Mark Cuban, obviously, never would have allowed this trade to go through.
Yep.
We all already know this. I don't know why he is so desperately needs to come out here and tell us this, even though we know it. And by the way, on Nico, I'm going to say this right quick before I forget. They got to the finals last year. Like, as much as we say that about Luka, we can also say that about their general manager, and none of it matters. None of it matters at all. He didn't get any goodwill from that. None of that was engendered. Like, you want this move, at least I'll give this to Nico. He's the only one that seems to own it, because everything else around it, that trade is an orphan, right? The owners don't want to claim it, anything else, and Mark Cuban wants to make sure that you knew, hey, she kicked me out of the house before we had the chance to do any of this stuff.
Yeah, man. And you know what's really interesting about this? Again, Mark Stein's reporting has been incredible around this story. He's been Dallas-based. We used to work together at ESPN. He's as plugged in the NBA as anybody. And he gave this kind of backroom explanation to how Nico got so high up in the power structure of the Dallas Mavericks. And they had told people, Mark Cuban had told people, hey, we're going to move on from Rick Carlisle, Don Nelson, and we're now going to figure out the GM, the head of basketball ops, and then we're going to have the head coach hired from that GM. And it got reversed because Mark Cuban wanted Jason Kidd, and one of Jason Kidd's representation was a man named Jeff Schwartz from Excel Sports Management. And when Jason Kidd got hired, they're like, who are we going to go get to run our basketball operations? And Jeff Schwartz, according to Mark Stein, got into Mark Cuban's ear, was recommending this guy named Nico Harrison. And so Jeff Schwartz comes in here, gets Jason Kidd hired, and also gets Nico Harrison hired. And then all of a sudden, in a couple of years, Mark Cuban's cut out of that entire organization. And I say this because we talk a lot about clutch and how Rich Paul is like shadow running the Lakers and LeBron James. We talk about Leon Rose over in the New York Knicks, shadow running the Knicks, and then finally gets the actual logo on the shirt, gets hired by the New York Knicks, and is now wearing a polo with the Knicks logo on it with Worldwide West. And they're literally from CAA, running CAA, the biggest sports agency, is now running the head of that sports agency is now running the New York Knicks. But there's this little like piece here of Jeff Schwartz. If you go to hoopshype.com and you look at which agent has the most salary under contract in the NBA, it's Jeff Schwartz of Excel Sports Management. And this guy has been under the radar for the NBA. Now it's like kind of like, wait, this guy was behind the scenes making recommendations to Mark Cuban about who he should hire, and it ends up being this guy, Nico Harrison from Nike. And then we have this complete cleaning a house in Denver. And until I reported this earlier this year, I don't think I saw this anywhere. But the most closely aligned agency with one NBA team is not Clutch and the Lakers, and it's not the Knicks and CAA, led by Leon Rose, the power agent. It's actually Excel, Jeff Schwartz's agency, and the Denver Nuggets. Jeff Schwartz is the agent, and his agency, Excel, is the agency for Nikola Jokić, Jamal Murray, Russell Westbrook, DeAndre Jordan, Vlatko Konchar, Peyton Watson, and Dario Saric, who they just brought over to pair up with Nikola Jokić. This is one of the most underrated storylines in the NBA, that the Denver Nuggets just cleaned house, and the most closely aligned agency with Nikola Jokić and Jamal Murray. There's this power void now in Denver, and I don't think people are talking about this.
I want to just point out right fast that I was going to make one more point about the Mavericks, and then from there was going to help make a transition into those points that Tom Haberstroh had reported. Like, I had it in my mind how I was going to do this as a host. But shout out to Tom Haberstroh, who was not leaving that shit to chance. No, sirree, Bob. He was like, I right here have found the segue into this other thing that I wanted to get out here and talk about. I'm going to put a pin in there for 1 second, and I'm going to make one point that was based off something you had said. Jason Kidd is one of the phenomenal political animals that has ever played basketball, right? This goes back a long way. He gets a bad rap for what happened at Cal, right? It seems pretty clear that the administration decided to fire that coach and not Jason Kidd, but he got the blame at the time. However, we have seen it all the way through, all the way from him leveraging that Nets job into the Bucks job, right? Like, he is a guy. He has done a good job of making it seem like he's playing good soldier on this trade with Luka Doncic. And maybe that's the case, but I don't know.
Yeah. When he was on that stage with Nico Harrison was like, I didn't need to talk to Jason Kidd because we think a lot alike. We're aligned. And Jason Kidd's just like standing there, just like not talking. And he's on that stage for a reason, right? Like, this is Jason Kidd. You talk about the Bucks and Giannis, and then leveraging his previous Brooklyn Nets job into that job, and then getting the head coaching job with Dallas. I will not believe that Jason Kidd didn't have any fingerprints on this trade, that he didn't have any sort of input and didn't want, I don't know, more say in the future of this franchise, and believing that Luka Doncic, who is, as you point out, one of the most high usage guys ever. And that's a lot of power that Luka Doncic has. And so one way you can get rid of that power and have more power in your organization is getting that guy up out of here. So, man, this is why the NBA is so great. And like the storylines, it's incredible. And I'd like the Luka trade was like this meteor hit the NBA, hit the sports world, where my cousins who don't even watch the NBA are now like, yo, did they really trade that guy Luka? And now we're seeing it where Taylor Jenkins is fired, and then the Memphis Grizzlies head coach gets fired, and then the Denver Nuggets clean house right before the postseason. And like, I'm not saying it makes me forget about the Luka trade, Bo, but it is kind of crazy how the NBA has been so dramatic over this last couple months that the Luka trade, without that game, I feel like it would have like faded a little bit in the recesses.
I think that's fair. I also think that if Jason Kidd had absolutely zero to do with that trade, we'd have heard a lot more through back channels about how Jason Kidd had absolutely zero to do with that trade. Like the Jason Kidd, my name's Bennett and I ain't in a campaign, I feel like would have been a whole lot louder if it was a full Jason Kidd was not in it. But to the Nuggets, Mike Malone got fired. I don't think any of us is surprised. If you've paid attention in the league, you're not surprised that Malone has been fired. Like, this has been a tense situation with him and with Calvin Booth, the general manager there. However, and I felt the same way about the Taylor Jenkins trade. When you fire your coach now, you don't reasonably think this is going to make your team better, right? Like, maybe you think with your Memphis that there's some things that needed to be shaken up, in part because your best player is a knucklehead, right? Like, maybe you thought that there's no way, if you're the Nuggets, that you think firing the coach with 3 games left and telling the world that the general manager is not coming back, there's no way you think that this makes your team better equipped to win a championship this year. It's not possible, right? If you thought that David Adelman was that good, then he'd have been the coach already. There's no way that you do this and think if I were a player, I'm like, this is like Major League. Like, you just put it on our season, except in Major League, they did it in spring training.
Bo, I kind of feel like there's a Luka connection to this. I saw Adam Mares, who covers the Denver Nuggets, talk about this on his
friend
show.
Of the program.
Yeah, he was great on this, and he was like, I think there is a little bit of what happens if Denver makes a run here with Michael Malone.
Yep.
I think the same thing with Memphis is like, I think Zach Kleiman, the GM of the Memphis Grizzlies, is like, what if Taylor Jenkins and Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, they all get healthy, they're making a run, and they get into that postseason, they find themselves in the NBA Finals. Because the Luka Doncic Dallas Mavericks just did that. And what do you hear is the reason why you can't trade Luka Doncic? It's because they just got to the NBA Finals. And they're getting destroyed in the media using that whole precedent. Is like, you do not trade a 25-year-old just took you to the NBA Finals. And I think the Memphis Grizzlies and the Denver Nuggets were like, we cannot risk Jokic and Malone and Jamal Murray making a run this postseason because it's going to be really hard to fire them after that. And so they do it now because they see there is potential that we're going to look really bad. And we cannot fire these people because they just got to the Western Conference Finals and beat the Lakers or beat the Warriors and got there. And I think there's something to that. Why you fire these dudes right before the playoffs is because you're afraid of what they're going to do in the playoffs.
I think you can fire any coach at any time, right? Like, that's my thought. Now, I think what you raise is a plausible theory, right? Not everybody sees it as me, but like, I feel like Taylor Jenkins doesn't have the cachet. You could fire him at any time. And I think that Mike Malone has such a personality that even if you like him, you could understand why somebody might decide to fire him. Like, it looked at times this year like he was trying to get fired. Not even so much trying to fire me or like do it or don't, right? Like that sort of situation. But you pointed out something interesting. You just talked about it a little while ago. Half their roster is represented by one dude. That was a fascinating thing to look at, especially since, let Jokic tell it, and I'm inclined to believe him, they told him they were firing Malone. They didn't ask him about it. Like, he doesn't seem like the guy throwing his weight around in the organization, but I guarantee you his agent does. Like the power that the player would normally have, does that power now become conferred upon the agent?
That's the big question. Who's going to lead this franchise going forward? Because Tim Connolly, who built that championship core and then left because he wasn't getting paid like a top executive in Denver, left to go take the bag over in Minnesota. And then Calvin Booth is promoted. He gets the job. They win the championship. Everything's great. And less than 2 years later, Josh Kroenke and the Kroenke family said, you're out of here too. And that's what's fascinating to me about this is they didn't just get rid of Michael Malone. We just saw this with the Memphis Grizzlies. They fired their coach. Great. There's Zach Kleiman out there being like, I'm the winner. I'm making the shots. I'm calling the shots going forward. This is my choice. Kroenke came out here and was like, we don't trust either of those guys. We don't trust Calvin Booth, and we don't trust Michael Malone. And there is a power void. And in the NBA, someone's going to step into that power void, Bo. And it might just be this Jeff Schwartz agent, super agent from Pete Sampras all the way back into the tennis days when tennis was the it thing in America. This guy who the Mannings, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, Derek Jeter, the Excel management, we've seen Bob Myers make the switch. We've seen Rob Pelinka make the switch. We've seen even Arn Tellem go into the front office with the Detroit Pistons. Will we see something like this where Nikola Jokic doesn't have to throw around his weight because he's got a guy who's going to do that for him? And Jamal Murray, look, one thing that's interesting about this game on Wednesday night, Jokic had a 20% usage rate in that game. That was the lowest usage rate for this season for Jokic in any Jamal Murray injury game. A game in which Jamal Murray did not play. Nikola Jokic was playing like a role player. Only took like a dozen shots in this game. The game that afterwards Michael Malone got fired, he had 33 shots. And in this game, he had 12. And he had a 20% usage rate for a guy who's right around 30, 34. What that tells me is that Jokic was like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of doing everything. I'm tired. I can't play defense in the way you need me to. And I'm just tired. And when you're seeing the change in the leadership and the change at the head coaching position, Jokic isn't going to be out here telling everybody, I wanted a change. I am not down with this. I got to do everything on both ends of the floor game. But he might get on the phone with his agent and grouse, or Jamal Murray might get on the phone with his agent and say, hey, man, Jokic is different this year. He is unhappy. And that communication, that intel is very powerful in the NBA. When you have Russell Westbrook, Jamal Murray, and Jokic having the same agency, and then suddenly they clean house, it raises a lot of questions, Bo.
I will say this, though, also about Jokic, because I saw that low usage, and it made me look at things somewhat differently. Did you read Mike Singer's Jokic book?
I have not.
I read it. I blurbed it. It's very good. I recommend people read it. It's a really fast-paced read. Like, it takes really... It creates a story out of very, very small vignettes going back to Serbia and through the whole time. Like, I think it's really worth checking out. But one thing about Jokic is he will mail it in on you, right? Not forever, but he will take a game off on you. And when I saw those numbers, I was curious if that had happened in this case, except if mail it in is 2012, 11, and 4 steals. you know, because I didn't see the game. I just looked at the numbers and I was like, oh, okay. But I do think you raise a fair point. He is not the guy that wants to have to be that guy on both ends. Although that's kind of what the job calls for, especially when you are that much better than your teammates.
Yeah, that's why I have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as my MVP, is because Jokic is giving up the most baskets at the rim of anybody in the league in terms of volume. Part of that is just straight. He's been playing a lot of minutes at the 5. They don't have a great rim protector. The guy who is that guy, Aaron Gordon, has been hurt for a bunch of this season. And so a lot of that is just like, Jokic, hey, come on down. I ain't going to try to get myself hurt or get in foul trouble. Go ahead, take that layup. I'm going to go start the fast break the other way. But he's given up 70% field goal percentage at the rim. One of the highest rates in the NBA, the most made baskets of any big man defender in the NBA. And I get it. Like, the dude has to do everything offensively for this team. And they have a 22nd ranked defense in the NBA. And that probably more than anything is that was untenable. All that offensive responsibility for Jokic, that everything is run through him. He's averaging a triple-double as a big man. I think a lot of that weighed on Nikola Jokic, and he will make his presence known or his feelings known in those games where he's just like, yep. Like, when they freezed out Jeff Teague, like, they're like, yep, we're going to speak volumes, not with our words, but with our actions.
How much of this do you think is the Nuggets not wanting to pay the tax, which Walmart money don't want to pay the tax, huh? Walmart money? Okay. All right.
Man, it could be. And this is the tough thing about small markets is, like, when Oklahoma City has to pay these guys, it's going to be really, really awkward, right? Because Denver is not a big city. It's not. And for a while, because of the broadcasting issues, a lot of the fans weren't even getting the games in Denver because they had some sort of disagreements with the carriers. And it's not something that they can print money and keep this team together. That's the weird thing. Calvin Booth signed Jamal Murray to a max extension this offseason when he absolutely didn't have to. That dude played for Team Canada and looked awful. And at the end of last season, looked awful against the Minnesota Timberwolves. You didn't have to pay up for Max. And now the next guy has to take over this franchise with about $100 million every year allocated to those three dudes: Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray, and Nikola Jokic. I'm very curious to see how they're going to manage the books going forward with $208 million that has yet to kick in. Next year, that extension kicks in for Jamal Murray. And if he's not an all-star, or if he's not playing at an all-star level, it's going to make things really difficult to build a championship contender around Jokic. And one thing I point out in that article for Yahoo Sports, Jokic has never played with an all-star, never played with an all-NBA, never played with an all-defense. And the next guy who takes over, they got to solve that problem quick.
They also have an issue. A lot of their money goes to a player that I think is probably untradeable. I love Michael Porter, except for the fact that his body is broken. Like, I could not imagine giving up anything worth a damn to pay Michael Porter $40 million a year on that sort of team. Like, Jokic, what does the max salary do? The max salary makes Jamal Murray a max salary player because you can't give that money to Jokic. Because it is clear when that boy is not playing with Jokic, like Team Canada, by the way, pretty good team, stunk. He stunk out there during the Olympics. Jokic makes him seem so much better than he is, and he is not bad, but he is not a max salary NBA player. Still, after all this time, not been good enough to make an all-star team. Porter, at the very least, is 6'10", shooting 40% from three at his best. He's just got a bad body.
Yeah, Bomani, it's not even close. Like, Jamal Murray has never finished higher than 10th in the West backcourt vote. Like, his best is an honorable mention. His best, his ceiling. And a lot of that is because of slow starts. He's a notoriously slow starter. And part of the reason why I don't think you give him the max is because he's notoriously playing himself into shape every year, whereas other dudes are out here, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Tyler Hero, Devin Booker, all these guys from Kentucky, they come on right away, ready to go from the jump. And Jamal Murray plays himself into shape come postseason time. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, man, Jokic, it's weird to say this, but like, he went from underrated into like, he wins the championship. And now I'm like, wait, are we underrating him again? The fact that he's never played with a John Stockton, a Scotty, a D Wade, like he's never had his co-pilot. He's never had a co-star. And Bomani, I'm wondering why that you think this is the case. Like, do you think this is a product of the management? Do you think it's a product of Jokic and the way he operates? Is that like maybe everything needs to be Jokic? Or do you think this is more about, hey man, Aaron Gordon and Jamal Murray are actually all-stars. They just haven't made those all-star teams. And it's not necessarily a reflection of how bad they are. It's just they are all-stars if they're in the Eastern Conference. Because I've heard that argument is that Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon would be all-stars in the Eastern Conference and his supporting cast would look a lot better. But to me, I think it's crazy that Jokic has never had a co-pilot. And I got to believe he kind of feels the same way.
No, I think it's crazy. And I think those guys are pretty good. Right? Like Aaron Gordon. You know what Aaron Gordon is? Aaron Gordon is a guy that makes you stop and evaluate what it means to be, what was he, the number 4 pick in 2014? Yeah. Now, the 2014 draft is fascinating to look back at. And I say that because at the time, we thought that draft had 3 superstars in it. Right? If you had one of the top 3 picks, like it was a big deal that Milwaukee could get Jabari Parker, who was from Chicago and actually wanted to be in Milwaukee. They could get a superstar, right? 2 things become fascinating on the back end of that draft. One was that Milwaukee, it turned out, did have a superstar, except it was Giannis. He was already there, coming out of maybe the weakest draft in recent memory. The other thing that became interesting about that draft was that there was a superstar in the draft. He was the 41st pick in the draft, and it was Nikola Jokic. It was not those guys. I guess Embiid did make it to that place, but obviously with a lot of injury-related caveats. But what Aaron Gordon proved to be is what you hope to get from the number 4 pick in the draft, right? We tend to think that at number 4, you should be getting a guy that's a superstar. You might. But what you're probably going to get is a guy like Aaron Gordon, a very good player who could be the 3rd best player on a championship team. That's what you get from him. And that's about what he is. And that does not translate to all-star.
It doesn't. And I wonder if OKC, I'm just throwing it out there. Jalen Williams is from Denver. He's a Colorado kid. Say OKC ends up an early out. Got all these picks. Jokic really wants to play with another star. OKC wants to pair Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, cash in some of these picks that you got, because you can't sign 50 of these draft picks onto your team. You're gonna have to do something with it and cash 3/4 for $1 at some point. OKC gets on the phone and it's like, hey, Jokic, we'll give you Jalen Williams and we'll give you first round picks. And we're going to pair Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with Nikola Jokic. And good night. Good night, everybody. And that's one of the things that I'm watching is all these other teams. Alperen Sengun, by the way, represented by Jeff Schwartz. Alperen Sengun and Nikola Jokic. Like, if things get really, really frayed between Jokic and the Nuggets, and Jokic is out here, and I don't think he's going to make a trade demand. But I can tell you this. Other teams in the NBA are looking at that power void in Denver and wondering when Jokic gets to be a little bit miffed by all of the rudderless franchise. The Denver Nuggets, are they really the team that I want to hitch my wagon to? And Kevin Garnett told this to Chris Bosh. Kevin Garnett said, man, my big regret is not getting out of Minnesota sooner. Loyalty only gets you so far. And at some point, that loyalty is going to backfire on you. And Chris Bosh decides to go to Miami. LeBron decides to go to Miami. And the rest is history. I don't know if we're quite there yet with Nikola Jokic, but I do imagine all of the GMs in the NBA are hoping he goes and decides, yeah, you know what? This ain't it.
It is a fascinating question because I think none of us feel confident saying that we really know what motivates Jokic, right? But I do think the people who think he doesn't really care about basketball are Looney Tunes. He cares clearly a lot about this. And I don't think that he's going to be away from Serbia, all that stuff, to be out here playing with losers, right? They had a window that got shrunk by the fact that Murray got hurt, right? Like, as much as I don't think Murray's the greatest player in the world, if Murray's not hurt in 21 and 22, I think they're legitimate championship contenders. They went to the Western Conference Finals in 2020 after coming back from down 3-1 in 2 different series in the bubble, right? Their window was then. It's probably closed now. I think you're right. If this were any other player in the NBA, as good as Jokic is, we'd be saying, get it right or he's going to ask out.
And I think that says a lot about Jokic and his whole energy about him, and that how he just gives off this, like, even after the game on Wednesday night in the post-game interview, he's like, yeah, it's a business. It's a business. But, you know, he also said that a beast is, he turned into, I think his analogy was like, we're vulnerable right now, but when a beast goes into beast mode is when you're most vulnerable. And he probably said it somehow more eloquently than me, that is a native English speaker. But the point is, he's trying to toe the company line. Like, yeah, the NBA is a business at the end of the day, but also we're still good. We're still out here and we can beat the Sacramento Kings. It's a question matter of, can they beat the Lakers? Can they beat the Warriors? Can they beat the Thunder? Can they beat the Timberwolves? We'll see about that. But I do think that Nikola Jokic, the fact that there has been a talent drain with the Denver Nuggets and they let KCP, the only guy on that roster that I think had a really good chance of being all defense, they let him walk this summer. He hasn't been great in Orlando, but he was great for Denver. I do imagine that Jokic, another year of this, another year of him having to be averaging a triple-double and still fighting their way into the top 6 in the Western Conference. I do think we're going to have our KG moment where he's going to be like, I'm done with this. I gave you guys 10 years to figure this out, and we'll see what happens.
Now, to be fair, the Nuggets at no point squandered their future to make an illicit contractual agreement with the modern day version of Joe Smith. One of the underrated moments in the history of the NBA. And I think the best part, I think our buddy Emil Hassan makes this point. Long and short, Joe Smith had agreed to sign a 1-year deal for the dirt cheap because there was going to be a bigger deal on the back end, and this would allow Minnesota to get in under the salary cap and then pay the big deal. When once they had his bird rights, I guess they could do that. But, and this is, I want to say, like the year, I forget, 1990 something, right? Whenever it was, Joe Smith wanted it in writing that they were going to do this because he was afraid that Glenn Taylor, the owner, might die. And that if he died, the deal would go up in smoke. So he needed it in writing. And it wound up getting caught up in some other probe, and somebody came across the paperwork in this other probe. But what makes it hilarious is, Tom, is Glenn Taylor dead?
Nope. Nope. Still out
Glenn
here.
Taylor's still here, still haunting the Minnesota Timberwolves. And Joe Smith didn't think he'd live one more year.
Yo, man, this is so like that was when was that? That was like, are we coming up on like 20 years of that? I mean, that was
it's well past that.
Yeah.
Because KG didn't leave until 2007.
Yeah. Glenn Taylor's still out here at courtside. Still got courtside seats. Man. KG,
Hold on, right fast. This happened. The signing happened in 1998.
See, this is actually what James Harden wanted Daryl Morey to do. Remember, Daryl Morey and James Harden had that split where James Harden's like, I can't trust this guy. And it's probably because of this, like, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Like, you take care of me on this 1-year deal if we get that max extension on the way back. And didn't happen. And you saw that was a very ugly divorce between James Harden and Daryl Morey.
I repeat, my Chinese friends who may not speak English, Daryl Morey is a liar.
Dude, man, I love the NBA. It's so great. It's so great. Hey, the playoffs are coming up here, man, and it's going to be great theater. There's going to be a lot of deaths in the NBA in terms of these teams, and we're going to see some really good teams go down, and it's going to be crazy. And I can't wait for it. I was not happy about the White Lotus, and I hope it's a way better ending to this season than White Lotus because, man, they promised a lot. And in that finale, I'm with you, man. That was amateur hour, the end of that show.
God, it was so bad. But guess what, buddy? You will have the opportunity to come back here and talk about the playoffs, brother. This has been excellent. That's Tom Haberstroh. Check him out at Yahoo Sports. And you also got the Substack for the people, right?
Yeah, TomTheFinder.com. We're wrapping up the Blazers season. The regular season's over, so I'm not on their broadcast anymore, but also Basketball Illuminati, which comes out every Wednesday with Amin Elhassan and Anthony Mays. Pleasure being here, Bo. Appreciate it.
All right, I appreciate you. Shaw, did Perplexity have anything to help us with on this here program?
Yeah, they did. I thought Tom's thought about Jeff Schwartz as an agent was fascinating, given his clients and the interrelationships between the teams. But, Perplexity pulled up top NBA agents, and obviously Rich Paul at the top, Jeff Schwartz right there, number 2, and his total contract value is just $100 million away from Rich Paul. But I wanted to pull up some of Jeff Schwartz's biggest contracts. Obviously, Nikola Jokić, $272 million supermax extension. Tyler Hero, 4 years, $130 million extension. The Jamal Murray one, which you guys spoke about, $170 million. Kristaps, $158. This Cade Cunningham projected extension, expected to sign, worth over $200 million with that rookie extension. So, and he just had Şengün this past year. So, yeah, Jeff Schwartz, major power player in the NBA, obviously, and probably, according to Tom, doing a little bit more than just signing contracts for NBA players.
All right, I appreciate you. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here on The Right Time. We do this 3 times a week. That is Sean Yu. He handles everything behind the scenes. Thank you, sir. Remember, hit the voicemail line, 323-596-7767. Remember that time you sent a text where you were talking about somebody, but you sent it to them? Yeah. 323-596-7767. And just to be clear, that did not happen recently. I just thought it would be funny. Remember, follow The Right Time. Subscribe, like, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars, I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. And we'll talk to you guys in a couple of days. Take it easy.